Donald Trump's chief propagandist, Karoline Leavitt, just gave a disastrous press conference in the Oval Office, which further tanked the market. People expected her to address some sort of trade deal as the market was already tanking today. She did not. Instead, she brought on stage the mom of Rachel Morin, who was killed by an illegal immigrant, and she used Rachel Morin's mom on stage to basically attack Abrego Garcia, who's now in this concentration camp in El Salvador. And despite the 9-0 ruling by the Supreme Court saying facilitate his return back to Maryland because you unlawfully kidnapped him and you claimed it was a mistake, bring him back. Trump's not following that order. So the Trump White House is trying to conflate Abrego Garcia with this horrific murder of Rachel Morin. Now, let me show you what was going on in the market today. Let's talk about this disastrous press conference. You see the market here, $1.5 trillion was wiped out from the U.S. stock market today. You look at the Dow was down nearly 2%. You look at the S&P, it was down nearly 2.5%. The NASDAQ down about 3%. The markets crashing once again. The futures markets crashing and doing worse after Karoline Leavitt's speech. Here's how the White House announced it. They said, press briefing by White House press secretary with a special guest. And then she posted press briefing 4:30, special guest. Tune in, as though this was going to be some sort of good news or enjoyment or something that was going to be beneficial. Nope. She showed up there with Rachel Morin's mother, and here's what went down. So Karoline Leavitt started again using the mom as a prop to attack Abrego Garcia, who has nothing to do with it. And then Karoline Leavitt said, so does anybody have questions here? And then some of the reporters had questions. They obviously wanted to ask about Trump defying a Supreme Court order. They obviously wanted to ask about Donald Trump tanking the markets. I mean, literally throwing the United States into a great recession or even a depression for no freaking reason at all. We heard from the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. He's looking at the data. He's saying, I have no clue why the Trump regime is doing this. I mean, they're crushing the economy. So they ask her, hey, Leavitt, can you respond to what's going on? She goes, any questions? And someone goes, I've got a question. And then in perfect gaslighting, North Korea, pink dress lady. I think she's wearing a pink dress. Pink dress lady's Kim Jong-un's propagandist. In pink dress lady fashion, she goes, oops, I guess no one has questions. Okay. So no questions for anybody. I guess we're done here. Here, play this clip.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Patty or for me? No?
I have a question.
No. Anybody? Okay. We'll see you all later. The president will be at his dinner later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for being here this morning.
Yeah, the markets did not like that. The markets did not like this press stunt using the mother of a murdered woman as a prop and saying, you're going to look forward to it, exclamation point. Here, Karoline Leavitt continues to lie and misstates what the Supreme Court order is. Here, watch this.
Nothing will change the fact that Abrego Garcia will never be a Maryland father. He will never live in the United States of America again. And the United States Supreme Court ruled unanimously that the President of the United States and the Secretary of State could not be compelled to forcibly retrieve this citizen of El Salvador who is currently locked up in a maximum security prison in his home country due to his MS-13 membership.
Now, it should be noted today, as we previously reported, that in a separate proceeding, Federal Judge Boasberg in Washington, D.C. made a finding of probable cause that Trump regime officials have committed criminal contempt. Now, one of the things that Boasberg can do is appoint a special prosecutor outside of Trump's corrupt regime, DOJ, to prosecute the crimes. We'll do more hot takes on that. They said, all right, Trump regime, either purge the contempt by returning all of the other people as well when you violated the court's order, or list me the individuals who I'm going to personally find in contempt who went along with the defiance of the court's order. So a lot going on. Also, Trump is for some reason appealing Judge Zinnes, the federal judge in Washington, Maryland's order, where she said, facilitate the return. Let me know what specific steps you're taking to return Abrego Garcia pursuant to the Supreme Court ruling. Trump's appealing that. He's going to look like an utter fool before the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. Going now to Jerome Powell's press conference that he held at the Economic Club in Chicago. Here's what he had to say. Play this clip.
Tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation. The inflationary effects could also be more persistent. Avoiding that outcome will depend on the size of the effects, on how long it takes for them to pass through fully to prices, and ultimately on keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored.
Yeah, in other words, Trump is crashing the economy. Here he is again.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated, and the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth.
Here he is talking about how even the Smoot-Hawley tariffs in 1930, which caused a much bigger Great Depression, were not as bad as Trump's current tariffs, like his 245% stupid tariff on China. Play this clip.
Let me just agree that what comes back very strongly, and everyone will understand this. These are very fundamental changes in, long held in some cases policies in the United States, and there's not any real experience. I mean, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs were actually not this large, and they were 95 years ago. So there isn't a modern experience of how to think about this. And businesses and households are saying in surveys that they are experiencing incredibly high uncertainty. There's a lot of research, some of it from the Fed, showing that does lead to businesses and households stepping back from decisions, which of course makes common sense. And you hope that that's something that you go through a phase, and then you know what things become more certain, and therefore people can resume normal economic activities given their understanding of what is the new normal. I mean, your question really is, what if the uncertainty remains high? I think that's a difficult environment. I think people's expected rates of return would have to be higher. I think that would weigh on, to me, investment just in general. If the United States were to become a jurisdiction where risks are just structurally higher going forward, that would make us less attractive as a jurisdiction. We don't know that at this point, but I think that would be the effect.
Here's Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, on the bond market.
So we've seen volatility also in the bond market, and at a time when usually there's a flight to safety, we saw yields on the German Bund and the Japanese government bond come down, but we saw yields on U.S. Treasuries go up. What do you attribute this to?
So I would just say the same thing. I think it's very hard to know in real time. I've had a lot of experience with significant moves, for example, in the bond market, where there's a narrative that people land on, and then 2 months later you look back and go, that was completely wrong. So I think it's very premature to say exactly what's going on. Clearly, there's some delevering going on among hedge funds in levered trades and things like that. It's also, again, it's the markets processing historically unique developments, and with great uncertainty. And I think you'll probably see continued volatility. But I wouldn't try to be definitive about exactly what's causing that. I would just say markets are orderly and they're functioning kind of as you would expect them to in this time of high uncertainty.
Here he is again talking about the data that he has.
The initial reading on first quarter GDP in a couple of weeks. The data we have in hand so far suggests that growth has slowed in the first quarter of this year from last year's solid pace. Despite strong motor vehicle sales, overall consumer spending appears to have grown modestly. In addition, strong imports during the first quarter, reflecting attempts by businesses to get ahead of potential tariffs, are expected to weigh on GDP growth.
And here he is talking about how even Trump's cutbacks on science and research is impacting the economy as well. Play this clip.
In terms of the cutbacks in funding and for science and things like that, we do see in areas, particularly in cities that have a lot of universities and research hospitals and research institutions, we're really hearing significant layoffs and significant impacts on employment. I don't know how much that will total up to. And of course, in addition, cutting back on scientific research may have implications for economic growth, for productivity, for health, for all kinds of things. But those are very difficult to estimate in real time.
Yeah, but I guess for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, long-term pain, say thank you, everybody. This is, I guess, what they want for everybody, to torture and make Americans suffer. Take a look. Spencer Akimian posts this as well. So the Trump regime is actually taking in less money in tariffs, or right about the same as former President Biden, for all of the chaos that he's created. Oops, Donald, looks like you missed basic logic, and looks like you missed a spot there with your ridiculous makeup. Also, China, you know how Donald Trump's like, who's got the cards? They don't got the cards. China has the cards, and China's actually showing how you competently retaliate in a trade war. They're surgically piercing the United States economy and causing devastation. And Trump and his regime are too idiotic to even realize what's happening. Chinese refiners are importing records amounts of Canadian crude after slashing purchase of U.S. oil by roughly 90% amid escalating trade war. In other words, Donald Trump attacked them. Here's what they're doing. They're also stopped exporting rare earth minerals to the United States. That's going to have a massive impact. And here's the Chinese embassy in the U.S. just mocking Donald Trump with his little short stubby fingers. And they're basically saying, who's got the cards now, Donald? That's the update from now. We'll get you more information as soon as we get it here on the MeidasTouch Network. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 5 million subscribers. Thank you for watching.
New Meidas merch drop. Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more. All at store.meidastouch.com.